Oh, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Wednesday's Chamber Chat. It's so nice to see you. It's so nice to see your names when you don't want to put your camera on, but it's still nice to see your names. Um, it's been a crazy week. I know we're all waiting for the Waterloo Region's website to come up and say we can register for our vaccine, and that's always a good thing. And I'm excited about that. I check it. That's the first thing I do when I get up at 5:30 in the morning. The first thing I do is go to the Water Region website and see if I can actually register for my vaccine. But it will all come, folks. We know that for sure. There are going to be better days ahead, and we're going to do lots of things to get this economy going and moving in the direction that it should. In fact, I heard, I know Mayor's on this morning as well, and I heard that the AstraZeneca vaccine is coming on, and I believe on Friday, those between the age of 60 and 64 will be able to register to get the AstraZeneca vaccine. We've talked a lot about vaccines on here. We've had experts come on, and I think there's some people, unfortunately, they did a poll and they said, what vaccine would you like to get? And Pfizer was number one. Most people wanted to get the Pfizer one. The second one was Moderna. The third one was Johnson and Johnson, and the last one was AstraZeneca, believe it or not. However, my advice to you, and I think every expert's advice is, when you get the phone call to go get your vaccine, doesn't matter which one you get, it's going to protect you. It's going to protect others that you hang around with. And we're going to get to those brighter days, as the CDC published the other day. People that are fully vaccinated and have waited the time period for the vaccine to actually kick in can actually gather in groups indoors without masks. So that is a really good signal coming out of health professionals globally to say that these vaccines are good enough that once we all have that vaccine in our system, we're going to get back to life that's just about perfectly normal, the way we had envisioned it heading into this. So it takes a long time. I can remember I think Thursday is tomorrow will mark the day where World Health Organization declared that this was a global pandemic. So it seems like forever ago. However, look at this, we're a year into it already, and man, that was almost in a blink of an eye. And I can remember that day very distinctly and thinking, this is going to be a while. And even though the first order of lockdown and stay at home was 2 weeks, I think we all really knew that that was just a tiny bit overly optimistic. And so here we are a year later, but the sun is shining. The windows are open, and better days ahead, and we're all gonna work really, really hard, because I think we're gonna have a tremendous amount of fun rebuilding our economies together, and it's going to be sensational moving into the future. This morning, however, and I wanted to take some time for our guest this morning to get his feet wet. It's always nice when you got a new cowboy on the block that, give him some time to sit in the saddle, get comfortable, wear it in a little bit so it fits nicely. And last fall, Scott Hamilton was elected to Cambridge City Council. And so now is the time to introduce him to you, to have a conversation with Scott and find out how he likes sitting on council, how he likes being an elected official, and find out maybe what some of his priorities. I can tell you this before I let him have the first word, that in numerous conversations that Scott and I have had over the last couple of years, he is incredibly passionate around small businesses in our community. He knows how important they are to our community. He loves shopping in them and spending his money in local businesses as much as any of us on here. And I can tell you that I think his ears are wide open to the small business community, and that any way he can help, I know he's going to do that. So I'll let Scott do his own verbal introduction to you, and then we'll get on with some questions, because I got some tough ones for him. Really, really, really tough ones. Scott, welcome.
Thank you very much, Greg. I really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for sharing your Wednesday morning with me. I know places to go and people to see, so I appreciate everyone tuning in. Just as a quick introduction, my name is Scott Hamilton. Right now, I'm sitting as councillor for Ward 7, the city of Cambridge. Long story short, I used to work in retail, minimum wage, worked hard, climbed up, was managing a store, didn't like it, jumped over to human resources. It was okay, it wasn't quite my thing. Went back to school at the age of 25, eventually studied, did a master's and a PhD over in the UK, came back to Canada and moved to a small, beautiful town called Cambridge, and just fell in love with it and decided after my wife and I had a child, okay, I want to get more involved in my community and I want to try and make it the best it can be, not just for the present, but for his future. And since then, as Greg mentioned, there has been a pandemic. There's been a postponed by-election, which actually turned into a by-election, which I was successful in October. My wife and I also recently had child number 2 on December 31st, 2020. So it's interesting. You talk about how much happens in the past year. Having a baby in a hospital during a pandemic is definitely something that we'll remember fondly. And generally, I'm here to chat with Greg to answer any questions anyone might have. And as Greg pointed out, I'm kind of I've never exactly called myself the new cowboy, but I'll just say I'm the new guy. So I'm keeping an open mind, my eyes and ears open wide, and I'm always happy to listen to anyone's concerns and try to integrate that into a very positive, cool path going forward. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and thank you Greg and the Chamber for the opportunity to chat, and I'm eager to have a conversation.
Well, I think what's exciting to me, and this is probably as I get a little bit older, I get excited at small little things like this, but it's exciting to me that a young individual like you with a very young family are contributing so much of your personal time and personal life and your family's life in helping to grow our community. And I think, I look out at a sea of young folks all the time within the chamber membership and in our circle of friends. And I really encourage them to start standing up because it's their world that council and MPs and MPPs are building. And they really need to have a voice in how that looks. And because, you are the folks that, and your kids are going to be the folks that are going to be around long after some of us. And we want to make sure that your voice is there to tell us how and what that should look like, because that's really the important ones. But my first question to you, Scott, is this. How have you found being an elected official, sitting on council, having to make decisions, listening to delegations, and being able to analyze all that information? I'm sure by now you found all the secret hallways and hidden passageways in City Hall, because that's the first thing you learn. And staff are really good at walking you around and making sure you know where all of them are. But how have you found sitting as a member of council and having to make those difficult decisions? Is it a newfound respect for individuals that put their lives on hold like this and do this?
So the first point of clarification, and I guess this has to do with the pandemic, and I don't know if anyone else has shared this or not, but because I got my counselor job during the pandemic, I have never actually been in City Hall in my office. I think I have an office because the mayor once texted me a photograph of my name above Mike Mann's, and apparently I have a room somewhere in City Hall where I can go and do some work. I wouldn't actually know. I've never been able to go there. Same with they call it the horseshoe. I'm really excited for the first time to check it out, but because of the pandemic, everything has been online, and I've been in this chair since October. So in terms of discovering the secret passageways of City Hall, I am eager. If anyone out there knows, and I see some councillors and members of staff, I'm very excited to learn those once we can actually go back to some sense of normality. But until then, I've been.
David Calder, the CAO, is on this morning as well, and now got the message. So he's going to make sure as soon as you're able, he'll take you around, show you all the secret passageways.
I'll bring that motion to council, being like, please reveal secret passageways, and yeah, that'll be a fun one. But overall, I love the position. I love Cambridge. I love helping people, and I love thinking through complex issues and trying to come forward with some resolution that actually kind of makes a difference. In my former kind of life, I was, you could say, like a super nerd academic, which to each their own. Some love it, and I know in my case, even though it was interesting, like there were weeks at a time where I'd just sit at a desk by myself, researching, looking at historical materials, thinking, writing. You could go weeks at a time without actually seeing any human being. And for me, that started to weigh on me a bit. And so a role like council, where you're actually presented with complex issues that really matter in the community, you can make a positive difference. I just thought this is fantastic. Even phone calls you get, right? They range from, stop climate change to, hey, there's a crack in my speed bump outside on the street. And so from trying to resolve those issues, you can really, I think, you can make a difference in people's lives. So federally, I know federal government deals with, national defense, and climate change, and all these kind of global issues that seem very far removed from us. But municipally, it's the everyday nitty-gritty issues that affect people's lives. And I think it's a really rare, very cool opportunity to be able to impact people positively like that. And we know whether it's the United States down south or different countries around the world, I think in the past few decades, there's been kind of a loss of faith in the mechanisms of democratic governance. And so just being on a municipal level, having someone contact you with an issue and resolving it, it restores their faith that, hey, my elected officials are actually working for me. And the system can work. It's not perfect, but it can work. And so every single time I interact with someone, in the back of my mind, I think, try and restore some positivity and some energy and some faith back to the democratic process that I think so much depends on. So from the nitty gritty speed bumps to, trying to restore some faith in the elements of Western democracy, give a huge thumbs up to the council role and my fellow councillors. And I'll finish on this. I don't want to ramble too long, but when I started in the role, you have some of the, you could say like, classic political strategists that just said, go in there and be strong with your points and ram them down everyone's throats and tell everyone what to do and speak with a loud voice. And, for me, to each their own, but that's not exactly the way that I think a conducive collaborative working environment, a collegial working environment is established. And so all the other councillors have been around the block. They all know their stuff. And despite the fact everyone always has a different opinion or perspective, I think they're all valid, they're all educated. I've learned a ton from every single councillor, and I think it's exciting to go in and just be able to learn a new job from so many people that are skilled at it, to be able to sit at the digital horseshoe and actually discuss matters that amount to so much for the city. It's a rare and lucky privilege, and I'll do my best to fulfill the duties of the role.
That's awesome. How does your, well, of course, like you said, you've been largely online with this, so you haven't been out and away from, home and meetings and that kind of thing. But how is the family embracing dad's new role?
This is, and again, I'm sure everyone out there is probably dealing with similar issues. It's a mix, right? Because physically, it's exhausting having I have a 2.5-year-old boy and a 2-month-old baby, and so it's constant. It never ends, as I'm sure anyone out there with young kids has experienced. So, like, if my toddler is up, it's full on. Someone described it, and I don't know, a celebrity may have nailed this one first, but when you have one child, you're kind of playing a zone defense. If anyone knows basketball, we can kind of drift a bit. So one parent's guarding the baby, and you can kind of go off and do some stuff. With 2 kids, especially young ones, you switch from a zone defense to full court, man-to-man. Like all the time when that child is up, you're around. And so, when I used to wake up and work in the morning and academic stuff or on council, now it's like I get half an hour until my toddler wakes up. And then if I don't monitor him, he's going to take like a cheese grater and go to all my stainless steel appliances or something, because that's just what toddlers do. So it's physically, it's been tiring. Mentally, of course, you slow down. it's weird, right? As anyone knows, you try and engage in kind of your workspace, you're at home at your desk and you're engaging with your colleagues and you're in some intense work discussion. And then you step outside the door to go to the bathroom and you're confronted with like, oh, I have all this laundry to do. Like my family is here. And so navigating that juxtaposition between work and home, it's something I think a lot of us haven't had to encounter before, especially not this quickly. So that's always a challenge. But again, being on council, being home with kids, a toddler and a baby, there's nothing that's actually more motivating to, deliver my energies to try and contribute to the city. It's the ultimate motivator, like you mentioned, Greg, to say this is their future. And whatever we do right now, especially those large scale infrastructural projects for the city, that's going to be their life. So it's a exhausting but a great motivator. So I think it's been a fun balance. I've enjoyed navigating it.
Yeah. That's the best analogy of having kids, multiple kids in your household that are really young, that I've probably heard. But bang on and dead accurate. That's for absolutely sure. I think, from my perspective, what I've always loved about municipal politics or municipal council is largely the politics is absentee. So, we all watch on TV, we all see the news reports of, the yammerings that go on at Queen's Park or the yammerings that go on at Parliament Hill. It's largely politically driven. Those of us who've been around long enough understand that it's largely politically driven. But, on a local council perspective, it's community driven. And it's community driven through the representation that's maybe your next door neighbor or your friend down the street or your friend's friend or, somebody that you see and walk by in the grocery store every week. It's really a community driven thing that is really largely absent of politics. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, actually, I think that's a much more articulate way of phrasing it. I would put it. For me, it's a difference between, let's say, theory and practice. So when I was kind of doing the academic nerd thing, you're dealing with a lot of theories, you're dealing with a lot of writing about politics and studying and historical analyses and that kind of thing, but you're not actually doing it. And so the first time I ever ran politically, I ran federally because I'd studied global politics, is what my PhD was in. So I thought, okay, cool, that's what I'm destined for. But the more I got out and started knocking on doors and dealing with people, right, it was no longer theory, it was practice. I found that it was much less, for me personally, much less exciting and engaging to talk about like high level abstract issues of global defense. And it was much more fun to engage with people on doorsteps and to hear about their local issues and concerns and what was going on in their yards and in their communities and in their neighborhoods. And it was, for me, a lot more meaningful, a lot more engaging. And I just realized through that practice, like, wow, I really enjoy this. And this is something that it was abstracted from those kind of larger scale political elements. And I think when you run for any party, you kind of face a choice, which is, do I go all in on the party line and drape myself in the color of the party and adopt everything they do and go that way, or do I speak more myself, more as an individual? And you isolate. When you do that, you isolate yourself a bit from the party, I think, but you're maybe granted a bit more freedom. And I prefer that latter route. I just said, I'm going to speak from the heart. I'm going to be myself. I really enjoyed it. And that's why when I ran in the by-election, I actually had volunteers from every single political party say, hey, you knocked on my door. We talked about a lot of engaging stuff, and I'm going to come out and help you. And so I think that's the spirit of community that I'm really excited for, is that it doesn't matter the color of your lawn sign in a federal or provincial election. Doesn't matter when it comes to municipal issues, because the nature of a community is that we're all just entangled and woven together on so many important things, whether it's the development of small businesses, whether it's fighting climate change, whether it's bringing in new large scale industries, or whether it's just fostering an overall positive sense of the community. I think those weave themselves outside of the party lines. And so, like you mentioned, those connections between neighbors, those open discussions, the feeling of it, as cheesy as it sounds, it's true. We're all in this together. That to me is the municipal angle of politics that I hope doesn't get lost, because we always are confronted in the news with much more attention that's given to federal, that's given to provincial, when really it's the municipal aspect, I think, of our lives that has the most dramatic effect, and also is, to put it bluntly, the fastest. We can get things done municipally very quickly if we all work together, share an open discussion, and engage on the same page.
Yeah, I absolutely just love municipal politics. I think it's so important. I've always said that really it's your municipal government that gives you the biggest bang for your buck. We all know that. About 4.5 to 5% of household income or business income is your property taxes that go to things like keeping the roads clean in the wintertime, to making your community beautiful, to building some of the infrastructure that you and your family use every single day, and to actually inspire growth and positivity and economic prosperity. Really, when you start to analyze the dollar value of what you get out of your municipal taxes as compared to what you get out of your provincial or federal taxes, there is absolutely no comparison at all. Municipal governments affect virtually every minute of our lives that we live, and they're very, very, very important to us. And it's very, very important work that you're doing. And I love the fact that politics be damned. This is about making a community a better place. And so, what I guess my next question is what about our community? What about our community do you really like? What is it that you look at and say, you know what, I got a blank slate here. We can, because of this particular part of our community, I think we can make ourselves even better.
My mic went off there. I don't know why, but no, our community, I want to just reinforce to Cambridge residents how special the community is. And I know, we hear it repeated over and over, but it really is true. I grew up in a really small town called Tottenham. It's like a miniature version of Cambridge. It was like 3,000 people at the time, just surrounded by cornfields and the Honda manufacturing plant. Lived in Ottawa, lived in Montreal, lived in Toronto, lived overseas. I was in Oxford for 2 years. And then Katie and I lived in the center of London, England for 3.5 years, like the center, walking around the Strand and walking to school and along Regent's Canal. And so when we came back to Canada and well, where should we settle down and raise a family? And we heard, okay, go west of Toronto. It's close to family. And we looked, no disrespect to other neighboring areas of the region, but we did look at Waterloo and Kitchener. We looked at Guelph, Burlington, Hamilton, Oakville, Georgetown, and we found Galt. We found Cambridge, and just thought this place is so cool. It really is, with all the rivers coming through, the history, the proximity to airports. It just has so much potential, and the vibe is so great. So the one thing that draws us, I think, to our community, we know already the history, the spires, the rivers. I think what really draws me to our community now is just twofold. It's knowing that it is a really cool place to live, but it can be so much better. And it's that potential that exists in the city that excites me to live here and raise my kids here and run for council. I think humans are generally, we're anticipation machines, right? There are studies that show that people are happier on a Friday when they're at work because they're anticipating the weekend than they are on a Sunday when they're actually at home relaxing. Because it's not where you are presently, it's anticipating the future that also yields whether or not you feel positively or negatively about your surroundings. And so with our community, we have so much going for us already, but I think what Cambridge really needs is to shift to that more positive, more engaged future mindset. It says what we have is great, and what we have had in the past was great. But if we take certain risks, educated risks, right? If we embrace components of uncertainty, if we make changes that are positive, we can make it even better, and we all know ways that the community can improve. So yeah, what excites me about Cambridge right now is it's a really cool place to live as it is. I love the running paths, the trails, the history, but just the potential here. I think it's unparalleled in Ontario. There's so much that we can do as a city, if we play our cards right. So I'm excited to do my best to try and help that happen.
That what another great analogy of how people think and how people live their lives, and thinking they're really happy on Fridays because even though they're at work, because they're anticipating the weekend, and maybe not so much on Sunday when they know they're going to have to go back to work. I think that is a fantastic way that we should all be looking at the future. You know, we should be saying we're here today, but we should be really excited about tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. And I know it's been so difficult through a pandemic to be able to look forward to yet another day of stay at home. But, you know, the fact of the matter is, it's not just tomorrow. It's down the road. It's out and further out than maybe sometimes we think, that we're having a compound effect on the values of our community, the shape of our community, and the worth of our community many, many years ahead of us. You know, you look at our downtown and some of the things that were built that we would call heritage right now, buildings, you know, those were well thought out back then, and they were well thought out to create a community that had a real sense of value in its culture and its heritage. And I think, you know, that's what really we should be looking for. We should be punting that football down the field as far as we can and looking as far as we can to say, what is that next phase going to be of our community? And what do we do today to prepare our community to embrace it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, and I think history, and I love antiques and history. Like you can see, if I wish I could pan around my office, and I have a ton of stuff collected from Southworks, and the Galt sign was from Dr. Junk. So just antiques and vintage stuff. I adore it. The history of a community, my own research when I was doing the academic thing was all historical. But history in itself, it is either nothing. I'll rephrase that. History, if not used strategically, can actually be dangerous, right? Because you don't want to stagnate. So any town, if it just says, keep what we are or what we were and freeze it. Don't innovate, don't change, just freeze it. It will stagnate because the reality of life in general is change, no matter what. Even as hard as we want to resist it, inevitably it will change, right? You know, a geologic time scale, the strongest, most giant mountain will melt away. I mean, change is going to happen. So how do you use history to help steer and orient and guide that change in a positive, productive direction that can deal with the future instead of feeling stagnated, right? Like we want the past to be a guide to think critically about it. We don't want to be straitjacketed by it. Mm-hmm. And I know living in Europe for a few years, you would go to some of those cities, which again, they've been around for thousands of years, but you'd see them kind of fuse those old kind of modes of being in the past with new modes of transportation, with underground subway systems, with electricity lines. And so you look at a place like Cambridge, and I think we need to adopt a bit more of that mentality as well, which is obviously history for history's sake is a wonderful thing. And we absolutely need it. I don't think there's a Cambridge resident that doesn't feel, you know, pangs in their heart when they drive by Ainsley Street in Maine and they remember the old Gore Mutual building. Mm-hmm. You know, the hat of the building sits at the top of Main Street. If that building were still around today, it would probably be the nicest building in the region, right? But it was taken down, and I'm not trying to critique the aesthetics of the Scotiabank, but it's not quite the same. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean that every single thing that is old is necessarily worth keeping if that hinders our development and our growth as a community, because all things have to change. And so for me, it's maintain the historical components, what matters as a community, what keeps us as a culture, but what do we need to actually grow? How can we embrace it? How can we fuse it together? How can we combine it? And again, one stroll, you know, down London, England, you'd see those old, very cool buildings that would be gutted inside or fused with glass or reused and repurposed in certain ways so that modern economic and social growth could actually emerge with the old school historical nature of the building and come up with something new that everyone could celebrate and grow together with going forth. So that's something I think for our area and our region with this really unique history and dynamics, we need to remember going forth. And you know, I know history's come up a lot in Cambridge lately, especially with the Preston Springs issue. I don't think there's anyone out there that would ever say history doesn't matter or it's not important, but I think we always come up with differences as to how to integrate it into the future. And I think there's a responsible way to do it. And I think we can get there.
I think we need to work really, really hard and trying to find every avenue we possibly can to bring it along, right? Because we can't just leave it there. Like you said, you can't just freeze it in time because nothing freezes in time. Everything degrades and falls down and gets old and collapses when it doesn't have a fundamental purpose. And, when we look at the old post office in downtown Gulf, and, there was a lot of eggs. Now the city's spending too much money and it's too elaborate. But you know what? What we did was we took that incredibly beautiful old building that was really a part of the heritage of this community and heritage value, and we made it purposeful for the future. This is now not an old, it's an old building from an aesthetic perspective, but it's got brand new life that's going to be here for generations forward. And that's really how we need to look at our heritage, because we can't lose it. It's absolutely spectacular. But we have to find ways that make it reasonable to move it along and bring it along to the 21st century, because that's the only way we'll keep it alive. Look at old City Hall, and with new City Hall put up against it, and I was a big proponent of making sure that glass walkway got put in, only because I knew once you connected the two, you needed now to preserve that old City Hall along with the brand new one that you just built. You just created a purposeful use. And who would want to get rid of, I think it's, and Dave Calder might correct me on this, but I think it's the oldest functioning council chambers in the province of Ontario now, and maybe even beyond that. But it's, why would we want to lose that? It's a beautiful, beautiful council chamber, a beautiful building. And by connecting it to the brand new building, we gave that brand new life, as new as the new building that was built there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I think our community is going to grow going forward. And I know we need to come up with those positive centers, or kind of like a nexus or a focal point within which we can kind of direct our energies and come up with those areas that we can come together as a group, as a neighborhood, as a community. And I know you mentioned old City Hall, fuse it with, I remember during the Raptors run to the NBA championship, getting the projectors and the screens out there. And it was I remember a great fusion of kind of the old and the new. And that's what I think, again, we need to do as a city, right? Like the proposed LRT route. I know there's some talk already about, well, is it going to mess with history or not? But it's on an either or. It's not a yes or no, black or white issue. It's like, get out Google Maps and look at every single one of those historical buildings that's supposed to be interfered with. And the question is always, does it have historical worth and why? Or is it literally just an old wall? Is it an abandoned wreck? So would my child, who is now 2.5, like when he's 20, if he goes to this space, what will be of more value and worth to him as a member of the community, right? What will make more of an impact? Because ultimately, the grand scheme of things, every single building that we have in the community was never there hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago, right? And this was Indigenous and First Nations territory. So it behooves us, or it really makes a difference for us as council and citizens to ask, what is the type of change we want to see as a city? What's the growth? And Cambridge, I think, as a city coming in, I want it to be more forward thinking. I want it to be more excited to grow and to change. Because I've knocked on, it sounds cheesy, every politician says, I've knocked on thousands of doors. I really did, from the federal contest to the by-election, knocking on thousands of doors. And different areas of the city kind of have different vibes, right? And it's understandable. Like if someone has lived in, and we hear this, and I'm sure some people on this call have probably say, I've lived here my whole life. And you can remember when it was Preston, Galt, Hespeler and Blair, and some people say, I don't like these changes. I don't like the way these streets have come in. I don't like that. And fair enough, that's a valid opinion, right? Listen to why those opinions say we don't like this or we like this. Ward 7 is my ward, and it's essentially growing outwards, right? It's Southeast Galt. So there's a lot of new homes. The rec center is coming in, which is really cool. A lot of doors that I knock on are families that don't know that history. And they're coming from Toronto, they're coming from Georgetown, they're coming from Milton, they're coming from Durham or Whitby or wherever. And they only know Cambridge is Cambridge. And they just say, oh, this place is really cool. It's got so much potential, right? And they're excited to embrace a kind of future forward forward-thinking change. And so that's, I think, what we as a city, if we want to, again, you create the atmosphere for community, for investment, for companies that want to come and stay in a particular area, you have to have that positivity and that energy, a place that people want to be, they want to stay because they think overall it's cool and they're excited to live there. So for me, for every change that I've seen on council, like one of my big questions in my mind is always, don't just think of what it was and what's going to be there next year. What's it going to be like in 5 years and 10 years? You know, and so whether it's the Preston Springs or pools or any different issues, I think a lot of Cambridge residents have been here their whole lives might automatically say, we're going to lose that item. And in their mind, they almost envision like, you know, when a gas station gets removed, there's just like a hole there for years. And you drive by where that gas station used to be and it's this empty lot. I think it's just, that ends up being in the minds of a lot of residents. So the desire to make change, of course, it's not going to be there if the image is just this empty lot. Look at what we lost. I don't want to make this change. I don't want, you know, this empty brown space. For me, it's think about the cool, like the post office, right? Think about that positive change, that vision, the people it's going to bring together, right? Yeah. Think about restaurants like the Cambridge Mill, right? The change that brought, the attention that it's brought to the city. I think the capacity for Cambridge to make positive, innovative changes and to attract investment, create a really positive vibe about the city, that can radiate outwards. But I think it has to be that overarching kind of change that the city has to say, we are in a really cool place. We've got so much potential. We're excited to engage this for the future. You know, it takes a long time to make behavioral change like that, but I think it's possible, and I think we're getting there.
Yeah. I think, you know, you look at what's happening in Hespeler, downtown Hespeler, you know, amazing stuff. All you need to do is drive through there and take away the memories that you have that just make it, oh yeah, it's downtown Hespeler, or drive through downtown Galt and take away those memories of, oh yeah, this is just downtown Galt. You know, the fact of the matter, those are our assets. That's the assets that we can build on. We probably got more assets of that kind than any other municipality in the province. And, you know, your conversation and talk about this really takes me back to those, you know, back at the turn of the 20th century that we're building up our community at that point and building some of these old buildings. Did they actually build that and put that last nail in the shingle on the roof and say, nobody better come along and change this? You know, this is going to be here forever and ever and ever, just like this. I don't think anybody said that. I think what they were thinking at that point was, this is my contribution to help build the community as far as it can take it. And then it's going to be someone else's responsibility to take it on from there. And I think, but preserving a lot of that and making it functionally purposeful, like we did with the old post office and many other buildings, you know, we pick on that, but, you know, look at the Hespeler Library. My gosh, you know, we were, you know, everybody thought, they're crazy. That, I don't know, if you went around there at Christmas time, that was a pretty remarkable sight to drive by the Hespeler Library. And these are things that the municipality can do that put a staple in the fact that we are progressive. We recognize our past, but we're bringing our past with us into the future. And I think those are great examples in it. And that's why it really takes, you know, young people to step forward, and they don't have to sit on council to have input and change, but they need to step forward and let their voices be heard. And they've got, I think, some great representation with you on council as well. I want to talk about something that's probably going to answer Steve Mantione's question. He said, what's the most pressing local issue you hope to resolve or tackle during this session? You and we're on exactly the same page on this. And we've had a number of discussions about this, about affordable housing. And I know you, just before everybody else got on, you and I had a quick little conversation about the real estate market, you know, and everybody's looking at the value of their home right now and saying, wow, you know, I cashed in. But, you know, if you're going to cash in, you better be like moving into a tent in the park, because that's the only way you can cash in, because you can't buy anything else. Otherwise, like you said, you probably actually lose. But the fact of the matter is, you and I have talked about a lot of neat, unique ideas that are revolutionary for the affordable housing industry or ideas. But I think this is the leadership that we need on council to help drive some of these innovative ways forward to create that really important thing we need in our community, and that's affordable housing and housing for those who have trouble getting it. So why don't you talk a little bit about that? Because I think to answer Steve's question, that's going to be an important tool or an important thing for you to deal with while you're on this in this session of council.
Yeah, this is it's a huge problem and it's difficult. Like it's affecting. You see the real estate crisis, you could call it that, all across Canada. It's a crisis if you make you could say like an average Canadian wage and you're trying to buy a home. Prices have skyrocketed. And Greg and I were discussing, for anyone that probably missed it, Cambridge right now, like the values of homes have almost doubled really in the past 5 years, depending on your range. And it seems at first like, oh, great, sell your home and cash out. Well, what if you want to move somewhere else in Cambridge? Like the difference is moot, and you may even lose if you're trying to upgrade into a larger home, right? Like if you want to cash out and move up to Sault Ste. Marie or, then okay, you're going to do very well. But the skyrocketing cost of homes right now, you could say for the average Canadian, for someone pulling in an average wage, 2 high school teachers can't buy a home, which I find shocking right now. But also for those individuals in our community that might be at the lower end of the income spectrum or bracket, or who have had, let's say, difficulties in life and require a bit of a help or leg up from the government. So it's a tough issue because housing, health, like these are regional issues, and then it depends heavily on funding from the province and from the feds. So one thing we can do, I know as a unified council, is that we can really try to push more for affordable housing to be included in development proposals. So since I've been on council, I've seen quite a few development proposals, but not too much affordable housing. If anything, it's usually just money given to a fund with very little actual substantive affordable housing that's been produced. Now, granted, there is some areas that the region has granted to us, so we will be looking at some affordable housing developments in Cambridge. I know there's been some that have been constructed recently, right up on Hespel Road. You kind of see the yellow entrance across from the police station. And those are great. They're smaller victories, but we need more, right? If we look at the issues that we're seeing and the disparity of wealth that we have right now in terms of income in Canada, just we need homes that the average Canadian can afford. So one of the things I think we can do, especially with Cambridge, the amount of space that we have, and trying to we're in this very unique pocket right now, I think, with this expanse of interest and jobs from the GTA, the announcement of Flair Airlines going to airports around the region, Waterloo and Kitchener are doing extremely well. So what are some interesting progressive solutions that we might be able to look at? And I know something like tiny homes, trying to bring those in to help millennials trying to get off their feet, or let's say you have older family members that want to stay with their family, but obviously can't fit in a house that's of a certain size. And also those that might need a bit of assistance, right? If you take someone who's even on the street and you give them something, just a roof over their head, a place to call their own, it makes a world of difference. It can really turn a life around. So that's something I'd like to look into more and examine with council in the future, is not just looking at regionally and provincially and federally how we can maximize the stock of affordable housing, how we can look at developers and new builds that they're making around Cambridge, how to actually integrate those developments, but also look at creative solutions, whether it's tiny homes or in-law suites or whatever, how we can actually say, what have we got? How can we alter what we have to make it safe, but match the circumstances that we have? And a big thing I think is, if you even say affordable housing, what image does that conjure up in your mind, right? I think the average affordable housing has been dragged through the mud, I think, in terms of the media and the public perception. So if you say we're going to put in affordable housing somewhere, I think the average person, because of, again, how it's been portrayed publicly, would think, no, I don't want it. I don't want that near me, because then they'll have images of, it might be homelessness or drug use or crime. And really, like, if you go to affordable housing areas around Cambridge, it's like you have teachers and nurses, and you have kids and high school kids. And I know even the by-election that I had, right? I had volunteers that were in affordable housing, and they were awesome. They were amazing people, and the neighborhoods were really nice. And so I think a huge aspect will be communicating to the community that affordable housing is a good thing, right? Like the old cheesy expression is very true: a rising tide lifts all ships. So if we can get more Cambridge residents that are in need of housing in homes they can afford, they're going to feel more confident. They're going to be more engaged in the community. They're going to be getting out more and spending in local shops. They're going to be, facilitating that kind of economic recovery that we need. But if you have someone in a state of constant precarity over something as basic as where they're going to sleep at night, you're never going to have that sense of community or that economic boost that's tied into it. So I know it's very general, right? But that's kind of the shift that I'd like to try to see at the provincial level, regional level, council level, and also in my own initiatives, trying to get something different, whether it's tiny homes or something like that, at least considered by council in the next couple of years. I think that could be a little victory.
It's interesting. There's a gentleman that approached myself, and I think I passed him off to you or sent you some information that he had given me about. He does that. He's a developer that develops tiny home complexes and the creativity. At first I was I kind of thought he was going down the path of containers, and he'd be getting these old shipping containers and putting them together, and it wasn't that. That was kind of the description, but these were actually built from the ground up, but they were modular in a way that made it a congregate setting of living that was so unique, and so like it would be unbelievable to see that happen in our community. And I think it's a step in the right direction. It's not about taking hundreds of hectares and saying, oh, let's dedicate all of that to these modular homes and put 2 million people living in there. It's about creating an opportunity where these can happen, and opening up the door to the possibilities of what does that look like, how does that shape our community, and what value does it bring in all of us. And I think for all of us, we want everybody that's living in Cambridge to have the ability to live with some sort of dignity. And a lot of that is having a roof over your head and making sure that you can afford to live in an area that's safe. And I think I just love the concept. I know there's all kinds of hurdles to hop over, but I think in reality, it's worth the effort to try and hop over those hurdles. I think it's a valiant effort, and I certainly hope we'll be there in conversations to help you along the way with affordable housing. We're actually developing an national affordable housing strategy to present to the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and I'm going to probably call on you, Scott, to bring you into some of it to make sure that we can actually get the private sector involved, where affordable housing can be built by the private sector as opposed to solidly with the public sector at this point. And I think that's really important as well. I noticed that there was an individual that put a question on, is there a way to cap overbidding on offers? I think, part of that problem is that it's a free market. Like, I guess if I had my house up for sale and somebody wanted to give me, double what I was asking, why should I have to refuse that because there's, some arbitrary cap that's been put on it? If somebody's willing to pay me that, then they should be able to buy it and I should be able to receive it. But I think that's where the problem is with the government imposing any type of cap on this. How the government can put a cap on it is they can find a way where developers who will come in and have access to hundreds of millions of dollars can come in and build affordable housing and put more inventory on the market. And that will be a cap in of itself, because when there's more inventory in the marketplace, that stops the overbidding almost right away. But we have to do that.
Yeah, I mean, there's the two components, right? The first is the cost has gone up so much because there's limited supply. So if we were able to make more supply, do it well and do it quickly, and I know we're looking into modular homes. If there are other very not necessarily fast, but reasonably quick options that make a safe, affordable, productive home that lasts. I think we absolutely have to look into those, and that's going to be something that could depress the price locally, at least in the short term and the long term. Another component too is that some people, especially, I'm like the early stage millennial. I'm born in 1984. I turned 37 last week. So I'm kind of at this age of when I was growing up, everyone wanted the big home. And now I talk to a lot of, colleagues and younger friends that say they want something smaller. They just want a bedroom. It's almost like put a bachelor flat on, I say flat, it's the UK dialect that sticks around, bachelor apartment on wheels, and I'm fine with that. So there's that component too. It's like we need to find a way of making more, doing it well, hopefully using locally sourced and Canadian made products. And the other component too is just that shift in mindset, right? When you talk about the market, like what we're finding now, look at GameStop, right? If you look at stocks, the idea that markets and societies function rationally, right? This was the old economic model that was really projected a lot in the 60s and 70s, right? You'd have economists trying to calculate the classic rational economic man based on a series of variables. What formula can you produce where you put in a whole bunch of variables, you put it through a computer, and you get exactly what's going to happen in the end? We're finding that markets aren't based on rationality, right? Humans are emotional, we're social. There are a ton of unpredictable things that happen in our lives that skew and affect and alter the way we make decisions and the way we value and judge certain things. And that's a component that kicks in as well. So as a community, how can we foster that desire to build more affordable housing? How can we foster that desire to live in a smaller home and to not want to overbid, let's say, on a home that you really like simply because you don't find it's feasible? There's that social, emotional, kind of historical component to not just people, but Cambridge as a community, which I think we have to factor in to a lot of our decisions as a council, whether it's housing or whether it's parking on a road. I find you can always have a quantitative study and a series of metrics that tell you a lot of information, but there are a ton of other ways of driving information about the community and the place we live, right? Like qualitative methods, whether it's interviews, whether it's historical research, these are still forms of data. They're still forms of information that can be just as valid depending on the question you're asking, right? And so that's, I think, again, whether it's housing or other questions for Cambridge, it's never black or white. It's never yes or no. For me, it's always, what is the question you're asking, right? What type of answers can you produce? And what's the best way of finding out the most accurate knowledge that's going to lead you to the best possible answer? And yeah, whenever you talk about markets, you get into supply and demand, you can go into like the classical models of Smith and Ricardo and whatever, but people are ultimately people, and people are not rational. People can be emotional. So our job as councillors is we pay attention to the emotion. It matters a great deal, but we have to think carefully and rationally when we're using taxpayers' money to build things that will have a dramatic effect on the future of the community, when whatever emotions we have today may not be around in the future. But whatever we build today certainly will be. So that's the rational, emotional component certainly factors in there.
I actually had a friend of mine who was the CEO of a Chamber of Commerce in California, and 2 years ago he retired, and he and his wife moved to a tiny home community in Colorado. Complete idiot from my perspective. If you're from California, and you move to a tiny home community in Colorado, you're like, that's like double trouble. And then a pandemic comes along, and now you're in this little tiny home. I notice your good wife is on, Katie, and don't worry, Katie, Scott's not thinking about moving you folks into a tiny home anytime soon. But let me tell you, that you probably look at a pandemic with all of the restrictive orders that have been in place, and you just can't imagine living in a tiny home at this particular time.
No, and tiny home is relative, because now I've realized, at first I thought we have a decent sized house. We don't have a basement, we don't have a garage, but then you factor in a baby and a toddler, and now I'd say we have a tiny home. Actually. And it's, we always think that too. Like when we were in London and we were in a flat, when we were in London, we say, well, what if we would have stayed, if we would have been in that flat in London, we would have been in a shoebox, right? And the real estate prices in London are so crazy that we were paying more to rent a tiny flat in the center of London, England, than we were for a mortgage out here. So I think that's a general shift that I think, and again, we're all reading about what will the aftershocks and the after effect of the pandemic be. And again, it's just the nature of history and time and perception, right? We don't actually know the general social changes that are happening right now that we're a part of. Those we'll only really know them in maybe 50 years, 60 years, when historians can look back and be like, wow, look at that really general social change that happened that everyone was a part of, but because we're so immersed in it, we can't actually see it. So that's one of the shifts, I think, with the pandemic is you have the nature of work changing, you have the digitization of a lot of the workforce, you have people leaving the cities and recognizing that, like, oh, wow, if I can't go to a concert or a Leafs game, why do I want to live in a condo in Toronto, right? Especially if my workforce is migrating out.
Yeah.
And that's really causing, again, such a boom, as we mentioned, in our real estate market, but also just a change in the perception of, what makes a home and what fosters a community. And I think, again, Cambridge has got to embrace the lessons, I think, that COVID is teaching, which is you need lots of green space, right? You need homes that are built well, that can stand the test of time. You need a properly functioning, I think it was one of your former guests, it may have been Scott Higgins, just talking about making a really cool place to live that people want to go. I think that's, for me, the lesson that COVID is teaching is the potential Cambridge has to be a place where people want to live no matter what, right? It's not just a commuter town, or it's not just an industry that's here. It's like overall, it's got it all. And I think really we have that already, but we definitely have the potential to improve. Although I'm tired of Zoom, Greg. I'm tired of Zoom.
I know we all are. I love the way Scott Higgins put it, though. He said, we all got it backwards. We usually say, live a great community to live, work, and play. He said, it should be a great community to play, live, and work. And if we center on that and focus on that, that's going to attract people to come in, because largely we spend more time playing and living in our community than we do working in our community. And so, that's important. We want to have good jobs and we want to have lots of work in our community, but we want to make sure our community is a great place to play and to live, because that's the most important part about it from our family's perspective. Absolutely. Scott, you know what? I always learn a lot when I have a conversation with you. And I told you the other day, you and I'd have no problem filling up an hour on here. I know you were a little bit worried what questions, how am I going to talk for all of this time? But you know what? We can, because you and I have some great conversations. I always come away smarter. And not that this is the only smart thing that I learned today, but our conversation ahead of time, because I got my hair cut and I felt it was a little bit too short. And you said that the last time you cut your hair was last September, and you trim it a little bit so that it grows out a little bit better. So that's what I'm looking forward to, my hair growing out later. And now it's kind of shaped the way I would like it if it was longer. So, but I always learn lots from you, Scott. Don't ever stop communicating with us, the business community here, with the Chamber of Commerce, because, really from our perspective, creating a community that your generation and your children's generation wants to have is of the utmost importance to us, because that's really what we're working every single day when we come into the office. We're working to create a community that's vibrant, strong, prosperous, and has a really positive outlook in the future. So thanks for joining us this week, Scott.
Oh, thanks very much for having me, Greg. We've talked, small businesses are the lifeblood of our community, and that will never change, I think. So I'm always excited to support the development of small, medium, large businesses in Cambridge. And I want to thank you and the Chamber for having me, Council and the Mayor for being excellent educators, as I'm the new guy. And I collect antiques. I do have this old small businesses. Well, they're really big business. Yeah. So I promise you, Greg, the next time I go out on the street, I'll be wearing this with pride. And just thanks everyone for tuning in. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out.
I know you're such a strong promoter of small business. Like right away, the first conversation we had, the first thing out of your mouth was small business. So I can't give you a hint next week on who is coming on, because I haven't officially asked her yet, but I'm going to be putting out an inquiry to our mayor to see if she will come on Chamber Chat next week and have a conversation with us about the community as well. Oh, look at that. She put her thumbs up. So I guess I guess I'll still send her out an official invite, but we certainly look forward to that one. So ladies and gentlemen, next Wednesday, 9 to 10, you're going to be entertained from our mayor, Catherine McGarry. That's going to be a great one as well. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you next Wednesday.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Greg and Scott. Great call.
Thank you.